The morning sun cast long shadows across the agricultural fields of New Geneva as farmers checked their crops. Children played in the schoolyard while their parents worked in the research facilities that made this colony famous throughout the galaxy. Nobody expected death to rain from the sky. Ambassador Lewis finished his daily report to Earth when the first explosions lit up the horizon. The hegemony fleet had appeared without warning, their massive ships blotting out the sun as they unleashed their fury upon the peaceful settlement. Plasma cannons turned buildings to ash, while kinetic bombardment cracked the ground itself. The attack lasted exactly 17 minutes. When the smoke cleared, New Geneva lay in ruins. 50,000 civilians had called this place home that morning. By evening, less than half remained alive, pulled from the wreckage by rescue teams that arrived too late to matter. Admiral Roy received the emergency transmission while reviewing fleet deployments near Jupiter. The message was simple but devastating. New Geneva had been destroyed. The hegemony claimed responsibility. They demanded humanity's immediate surrender and submission to their authority. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session as news of the attack spread across known space. Representatives from a dozen species gathered in the Great Chamber, their voices creating a buzz of concern and speculation. The hegemony delegations sat in their elevated seats, looking pleased with themselves. Counselor Varn of the hegemony stood to address the assembly. His forearms spread wide in a gesture of mock sympathy. The destruction of New Geneva was regrettable but necessary. Humanity has refused to share their quantum computing technology with the greater galactic community. They have rejected our generous offer of protection. Such selfish behavior cannot be tolerated. The other council members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Everyone knew the hegemony's reputation for dealing with species that refused to bow to their demands. The Keth Empire had been reduced to a client state. The Vorthan Collective had simply vanished after rejecting hegemony terms. Humanity appeared to be next. President Walsh received the council's transcript within hours. Her advisors filled the situation room, their faces grim as they discussed response options. General Brooks argued for immediate military action while Secretary Hill pushed for diplomatic solutions. The debate continued for hours. They killed 50,000 innocent people. General Brooks slammed his fist on the table. This cannot stand. We need to show them that humanity will not be intimidated by terrorists. Secretary Hill shook her head. The hegemony controls 40 star systems. They have the largest fleet in the galaxy. If we fight them directly, they will crush us. We need to find another way. President Walsh listened to the arguments in silence. Her expression revealed nothing of her thoughts. Finally, she raised her hand for quiet. What do we know about their capabilities? Dr. Ann stepped forward with her analysis. Their ships are powerful, but their tactics are predictable. They rely on overwhelming force and superior numbers. Most species surrender before the fighting begins. They have never faced sustained resistance. And our capabilities? The president asked. Dr. Ann smiled for the first time that day. That depends on how much you want them to know about what we can really do. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. For 12 years, humanity had played the role of peaceful newcomers to galactic politics. They had established colonies focused on research and trade. They had avoided conflicts and sought diplomatic solutions to every dispute. The galaxy saw them as harmless. What the galaxy did not know was that humanity had been preparing for this moment since first contact. Every trade mission had included intelligence gathering. Every research station had dual purposes. Every colony had been designed with defense in mind. The hegemony had just made the greatest mistake in their long history. They had attacked human civilians while believing humanity was weak and defenseless. They were about to learn how wrong they were. President Walsh made her decision. Dr. Ann, activate Protocol 7. General Brooks, prepare the fleet for immediate deployment. Secretary Hill, draft a response to the Galactic Council. Make it clear that humanity will not surrender to terrorists. 3 hours later, President Walsh stood before the assembled Galactic Council. The chamber was packed with representatives from every major species. The hegemony delegation looked smug and confident. They expected humanity to beg for mercy. Honored members of the council. President Walsh began, her voice calm and measured. Yesterday, the hegemony launched an unprovoked attack on New Geneva, a civilian colony with no military installations. They murdered 50,000 innocent people, including children. They demand that humanity surrender our sovereignty and become their vassals. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Councillor Varn rose to interrupt, but President Walsh continued without pause. The hegemony believes that superior firepower gives them the right to dictate terms to peaceful species. They assume that because humanity prefers diplomacy to violence, we are incapable of defending ourselves. They are mistaken. The chamber fell silent. Every representative leaned forward to hear what came next. Humanity has faced bullies before. We have dealt with those who believe that might makes right. We have learned that the only way to stop a bully is to hit back harder than they hit you. The hegemony wanted to test our resolve. They are about to get their answer. President Walsh paused, letting her words sink in. We do not want war. We have never wanted war, but we will not allow the murder of our people to go unpunished. The hegemony has 24 hours to withdraw their fleets from human space and formally apologize for their crimes. If they refuse, they will discover what happens when you attack human civilians. The transmission ended. Across the galaxy, species representatives struggled to process what they had heard. Humanity had just declared war on the most powerful military force in known space. Either they were completely insane or they knew something that nobody else did. Councillor Varn laughed as he prepared his response. The humans are even more primitive than we thought. They believe threats and posturing will save them. Tomorrow, we will show them what real power looks like. The hegemony fleet began moving toward human space, confident in their victory. They had no idea that humanity had been watching and waiting for this moment. The trap was already being set. Deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, Dr. Ann walked through corridors that officially did not exist. The Prometheus research facility had been carved from solid rock and shielded from every known form of detection. For 12 years, the brightest minds in human space had worked in these tunnels, preparing for the day when humanity would need to defend itself. Status report, Dr. Ann said as she entered the main laboratory. Around her, dozens of scientists and engineers worked at stations filled with alien technology. They had been reverse engineering every piece of equipment they could acquire through trade, espionage, and careful observation. Dr. Smith looked up from his workstation. The quantum disruptor arrays are ready for deployment. We can neutralize their shield generators from a distance of 50,000 kilometers. The adaptive armor plating has been tested against their plasma cannons. Our ships can take direct hits and keep fighting. Dr. Ann nodded and moved to the next station. What about the stealth systems? Dr. Wilson smiled. Better than expected. The quantum phase generators allow our ships to exist in a state of superposition. They can appear and disappear at will. The hegemony sensors cannot track what does not technically exist in normal space. Across the facility, teams worked on weapons that would have shocked the galactic community. Humanity had not just been copying alien technology. They had been improving it, combining it with human innovation to create something entirely new. The gravity manipulation system could crush enemy ships without firing a shot. The matter conversion torpedoes could turn asteroids into antimatter bombs. The neural disruption fields could shut down alien nervous systems from across a star system. Dr. Ann reached the command center where General Brooks waited with his senior staff. The walls displayed tactical information from across human space. Every colony, every trade route, every apparent weakness was actually part of a carefully planned defensive network. The hegemony has taken the bait, General Brooks reported. Their intelligence services believe our colonies are defenseless. They think our cargo ships are actually cargo ships. They have no idea what they are about to face. Above the Pacific Ocean, Captain Tom stood in the command center of the merchant vessel Peaceful Trader. To external sensors, his ship looked like a typical human cargo hauler. The hull was painted in civilian colors and the transponder broadcast commercial shipping codes. The reality was very different. Beneath the false hull plates lay weapon systems that would have impressed the hegemony's best engineers. The cargo bays contained not trade goods but military equipment ready for instant deployment. The crew consisted of volunteers from human special forces units. "Captain," his tactical officer reported, "we have confirmation from the other ships. The entire merchant fleet is ready for conversion to combat status. All personnel are at their stations." Captain Tom nodded. For 12 years he had played the role of a simple cargo captain. He had traded with alien species, smiled at their jokes, and allowed them to think humans were naive and trusting. Tomorrow they would discover their mistake. The transformation began at precisely 0800 hours. Across human space, innocent-looking cargo ships began to shed their disguises. False hull plates fell away to reveal weapons batteries. Civilian transponders switched to military frequencies. Trade vessels became warships in a matter of minutes. The mining stations that dotted human space underwent similar changes. Equipment that had been extracting minerals from asteroids suddenly revealed its true purpose. Each station was actually a fortress, armed with weapons powerful enough to destroy entire fleets. President Walsh watched the transformation from the Situation Room. Screens showed the deployment of humanity's hidden military assets. She had authorized this deception years ago, knowing that the galaxy would eventually test their resolve. "The hegemony intelligence services are reporting massive confusion," Secretary Hill announced. "They are trying to understand how we could have hidden so much military hardware. Their analysts are completely baffled." Dr. Ann entered the Situation Room carrying a tablet filled with data. "The psychological profiles are complete. We have analyzed 12 years of communications intercepts, diplomatic exchanges, and behavioral observations. We know exactly how the hegemony leadership thinks." She activated the main display, showing personality profiles of key hegemony commanders. They are predictable. They rely on intimidation and overwhelming force. They have never faced an enemy that could match their capabilities. When they encounter unexpected resistance, they respond by committing more resources to the problem. President Walsh studied the information. "You are saying they will escalate?" "They will throw everything they have at us," Dr. Ann confirmed. "Their psychology does not allow for strategic retreat. They will see any resistance as a challenge to their authority. They will keep fighting until they win or until they have nothing left to fight with." General Brooks smiled grimly. "Then we will give them exactly what they want. Let them commit their entire fleet to attacking us. By the time they realize their mistake, it will be too late." The hegemony response came exactly as predicted. Intelligence. Reports showed their fleets massing for a coordinated assault. They were planning to overwhelm human defenses with superior numbers and firepower. Every available ship was being recalled from patrol duties and garrison assignments. "They are doing exactly what we hoped they would do," Dr. Ann observed. "They are concentrating their forces for maximum impact. They have no idea that we want them to bunch together." Captain Tom received his new orders while his ship moved toward the outer edge of human space. The peaceful trader and her sister ships would be the first line of defense. Their job was to appear vulnerable while drawing the hegemony fleet into the kill zone. "All stations, this is the captain," he announced over the ship's communications system. "In 12 hours we will engage the enemy. They believe we are weak and defenseless. They are about to learn the difference between peaceful and helpless." The crew responded with quiet determination. They had trained for this moment for years. They knew their roles and trusted their equipment. Most importantly, they remembered the images from New Geneva. 50,000 innocent people deserve justice. Across the galaxy, other species watched the developing conflict with growing concern. The hegemony had never been seriously challenged before. If humanity could actually resist their expansion, it would change the balance of power throughout known space. but nobody believed humanity could actually win. The hegemony controlled too many ships, too many resources, too many worlds. At best, humans might inflict some damage before being overwhelmed. At worst, they would be completely destroyed as an example to others. Dr. Anne finished her final preparations in the Prometheus facility. The weapons were ready, the ships were in position. The trap was set. All that remained was to spring it at the right moment. She thought about the hegemony's demands for surrender. They wanted humanity to hand over their quantum computing technology and accept vassal status. They believed that superior firepower gave them the right to dictate terms to peaceful species. They were about to discover that humanity had a very different definition of the word peaceful. The hegemony fleet emerged from hyperspace like a storm made of steel and fury. Admiral Korak stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching as 300 warships took position around the human colony of New Boston. The sight filled him with satisfaction. No species had ever survived such an overwhelming show of force. "Begin the attack," he commanded. "Show these primitives what happens when they defy the hegemony." The assault began with a thunderous barrage of plasma fire. The hegemony ships spread out in perfect formation, their weapons painting the darkness with deadly light. They expected the colony to crumble within minutes, just as New Geneva had done. Instead, something unexpected happened. The colony's defensive systems activated, revealing themselves for the first time. Energy shields flared to life around critical installations. Point defense arrays began shooting down incoming missiles with impossible accuracy. The mining platforms that had seemed so innocent suddenly bristled with weapons. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, "the colony is fighting back. Their defenses are much stronger than intelligence indicated." Admiral Korax frowned. The humans were putting up more resistance than expected, but it would not save them. He ordered his ships to increase their fire rate and focus on the defensive installations. The colony would fall even if it took longer than planned on the surface of New Boston. Commander Davis coordinated the evacuation from the colony's command center. Around her, technicians worked frantically to organize the departure of 30,000 civilians. Transport ships were already lifting off, carrying refugees to safety. "Status report," she demanded. "The civilians are boarding the transports." "As planned," her aide replied. "The defensive systems are holding, but we cannot maintain this level of resistance indefinitely. The hegemony fleet is too large." Commander Davis nodded. Everything was proceeding according to plan. The colony's defenses were designed to hold long enough for the evacuation to succeed. Once the civilians were safe, the real operation could begin. Above the planet, the evacuation fleet scattered in apparent panic. Dozens of transport ships fled in different directions, their crews broadcasting emergency signals. The hegemony intercepted the communications and heard exactly what they expected to hear: human commanders pleading for help, civilian populations fleeing in terror. "The humans are running," Admiral Korax observed with satisfaction. "Order the fleet to pursue the refugee ships. We will capture them and use them as leverage to force Earth's surrender." The hegemony fleet broke formation to chase the fleeing transports. Their ships spread across the star system, each group pursuing what appeared to be helpless civilian vessels. The refugees seemed to be heading for the outer planets, probably hoping to hide in the asteroid fields. Captain Tom watched the tactical display from the bridge of his disguised cargo ship. The hegemony fleet was doing exactly what humanity had hoped they would do. They were splitting their forces and chasing shadows. "All units," he broadcast on the secure channel, "the enemy has taken the bait. Begin Phase 2. Across the star system, the fleeing transport ships began their transformation. False hull plates fell away to reveal weapon systems. Civilian transponders switched to military frequencies. The refugees were actually human special forces units, and the transports were heavily armed warships. The hegemony commanders realized their mistake too late. The ships they had been chasing turned to face their pursuers. The helpless civilians they had planned to capture were actually elite military units with weapons that outclassed anything in the hegemony arsenal. "We are under attack," came the panicked transmission from one of the hegemony squadrons. "The civilian ships are firing on us. They have military-grade weapons. How is this possible?" Admiral Korex stared at his tactical display in growing horror. The scattered refugee fleet was revealing itself to be a perfectly coordinated military force. His ships were being engaged by enemies that should not exist. "All units return to formation," he ordered. "We are facing a trap. Regroup and prepare for coordinated assault." But regrouping was easier said than done. The hegemony ships were spread across the entire star system, each group engaged with human forces that had suddenly appeared from nowhere. The mining stations that had seemed so innocent were revealing hidden weapons. The asteroid fields were full of concealed gun platforms. The battle became a series of smaller engagements scattered across millions of kilometers. Each hegemony squadron found itself outnumbered and outgunned by enemies that had appeared out of nowhere. The humans were using weapons and tactics that no one had seen before, Commander. Davis abandoned the colony's command center as the last of the civilians escaped. Her job was done. The evacuation had been successful, and the hegemony fleet was exactly where humanity wanted them. Now the real fighting could begin. "Sir," Admiral Corex's communications officer reported, "we are receiving surrender demands from the human forces. They want us to power down our weapons and prepare to be boarded." Admiral Korex nearly laughed. The humans were actually demanding his surrender. They had managed to surprise him with their deception, but his fleet still outnumbered theirs. He had 300 ships against perhaps 50 human vessels. The odds were still in his favor. "Ignore their demands," he ordered. "All units, concentrate fire on the nearest enemy ships. We may have been surprised, but we still have superior numbers." The hegemony forces regrouped and began fighting back with their usual tactics. They relied on overwhelming firepower and superior numbers to crush their enemies. These methods had worked for centuries against every species they had encountered, but humanity was not like other species. The human ships did not fight in predictable patterns. They appeared and disappeared at will, striking from unexpected angles and vanishing before the hegemony could respond. Their weapons seemed to ignore shields and armor that had protected hegemony vessels for decades. "Sir," the tactical officer reported, "we have lost 30% of our fleet. The human weapons are more advanced than anything in our database. They are using technology that should not exist." Admiral Korex watched as another of his ships exploded in a brilliant flash of light. The humans were not just winning individual battles. They were systematically destroying his entire fleet while suffering minimal losses themselves. "How is this possible?" he demanded. Intelligence reports indicated that humans were a primitive species with minimal military capabilities. The answer came from an unexpected source. A human transmission cut through the battle communications, clear and calm despite the chaos around them. "Admiral Korex," the voice said, "this is Captain Tom of the human fleet. You have been fighting shadows and decoys for the past 6 hours. You have discovered that civilian ships are not always civilian. You have learned that mining equipment can be weapons. You have realized that peaceful species are not necessarily helpless species." The transmission paused, letting the words sink. Around the star system, the battle continued as human forces pressed their advantage. "You made a mistake when you attacked New Geneva," Captain Tom continued. "You assume that because humanity prefers peace, we are incapable of war. You believe that because we avoid conflict, we are weak. You are learning the difference between peaceful and defenseless." Admiral Korex tried to respond, but the transmission continued without pause. "Your fleet is trapped in a killing field of our design. Your ships are being destroyed by weapons you did not know existed. Your forces are scattered and confused. You have one chance to prevent the complete destruction of your fleet. Order your ships to surrender immediately, or discover what happens when you threaten human civilians." The transmission ended. Admiral Korex stared at his tactical display, watching as his fleet continued to suffer losses. The humans had outmaneuvered him completely. What he had thought was a simple assault on a defenseless colony had become a carefully planned ambush. He looked at the casualty reports. 70% of his fleet had been destroyed or disabled. The remaining ships were scattered across the star system, each group fighting for survival against enemies that seemed to appear from nowhere. For the first time in his career, Admiral Corax considered the possibility of defeat. The humans had not just resisted his attack. They had turned his own tactics against him, using his assumptions and prejudices to lead him into a trap. The Great Hegemony fleet had been outsmarted by a species they had dismissed as primitive. The implications were staggering. If humanity could do this to them, what did that say about their own capabilities? The emergency session of the Hegemony High Command convened in the deepest chambers of their capital world. The four ruling species gathered around a holographic display that showed the devastating losses from the new Boston engagement. Supreme Commander Thek slammed his massive fist on the table, causing the other representatives to flinch. "Explain to me how a primitive species destroyed 70% of our assault fleet," he roared. Admiral Corax was one of our finest commanders. His ships were equipped with the best weapons in the galaxy. How did the humans defeat him so easily? General Voss activated the tactical replay, showing the battle from beginning to end. The humans used deception on a scale we have never encountered. Their civilian ships were actually warships. Their mining equipment was actually weapons. Their entire colonies were elaborate traps designed to lure our forces into kill zones. Impossible, Supreme Commander Thek declared. No species has ever hidden military assets so effectively. Our intelligence services monitor every world, every ship, every installation. How could we miss such extensive preparations? Minister Qual stepped forward with her analysis. The humans have been preparing for this conflict since they first made contact with galactic civilization. Every trade mission included intelligence gathering. Every diplomatic exchange was designed to learn our capabilities. They have been studying us for 12 years. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. The hegemony had always prided themselves on their intelligence networks. They knew the capabilities of every species in the galaxy. They had detailed files on every military installation, every weapon system, every defensive network, but humanity had fooled them completely. For 12 years, they had maintained the illusion of being a peaceful, defenseless species while secretly building one of the most advanced military forces in known space. What are their true capabilities? Supreme Commander Thek demanded. General Voss consulted his data tablet. Unknown. The weapons they used against Admiral Corax were unlike anything in our databases. They appear to have developed technologies that we did not know existed. Their ships can appear and disappear at will. Their weapons ignore our shields and armor. This changes everything, Minister Qual observed. If the humans can defeat our forces so easily, what does that say about our position in the galaxy? Other species will see our weakness. They will begin to question our authority. Supreme Commander Thek rose from his seat, his forearms spread wide in a gesture of absolute determination. Then we must ensure that no other species learns of our defeat. The human threat must be eliminated completely. Call back every ship. From every patrol, recall every fleet from every border. We will commit everything to the destruction of humanity. The other commanders exchanged glances. What Supreme Commander Thek was proposing was unprecedented. The hegemony had never committed their entire military to a single campaign. They had always maintained reserves, always kept forces in position to defend their borders. Sir, General, Voss said carefully, if we withdraw all our forces from the border worlds, other species might take advantage of our absence. The Stellar Federation has been testing our defenses for years. The Free Worlds Alliance might see this as an opportunity to expand their territory. Supreme Commander Thek's eyes blazed with fury. Do you think I care about border disputes when our very existence is threatened? The humans have humiliated us. They have shown the galaxy that the hegemony can be defeated. If we do not destroy them completely, our empire will collapse from within. Deep in the Prometheus facility, Dr. Ann watched the hegemony fleet movements with growing satisfaction. Her psychological analysis had been absolutely correct. The hegemony leadership was responding to their defeat exactly as predicted. They were committing everything to the destruction of humanity. "They are doing exactly what we hoped they would do," she reported to President Walsh. Supreme Commander Thek's ego cannot accept defeat. He is recalling every ship, every fleet, every military asset. They are putting everything into one massive assault. President Walsh studied the tactical displays showing hegemony ships converging from across their empire. "How many ships are we talking about?" "Conservative estimates suggest 800 vessels," Dr. Ann replied. "They are bringing everything they have. If this plan works, we will cripple their military capability for decades. If it fails, humanity will be extinct within a week." General Brooks entered the command center carrying orders from the Joint Chiefs. "The President has authorized Protocol Omega. All stealth assets are being deployed. The Quantum Fleet is ready for combat operations. We are committed to this course of action." Across human space, the final preparations began. The merchant vessels that had fooled the hegemony at New Boston were just the beginning. Humanity's true military assets had remained hidden even from their own success. The Quantum Fleet existed. In a state of superposition, invisible to all known forms of detection. Captain Tom stood in the command center of the Quantum Striker, humanity's most advanced warship. Unlike the disguised cargo vessels, this ship had been designed from the beginning as a weapon of war. Its hull was made of adaptive matter that could shift its properties at will. Its weapons could tear holes in space itself. "Captain," his science officer reported, "the quantum phase generators are operating at peak efficiency. We can maintain superposition for 72 hours without losing coherence. The entire fleet is ready for combat deployment." Around him, the crew prepared for the greatest battle in human history. They knew the odds they faced. 800 hegemony ships against the 50 vessels of the Quantum Fleet. On paper, it was impossible. In reality, it was exactly what humanity had been preparing for. The hegemony fleet arrived at the edge of human space like a swarm of angry insects. 800 ships arranged in perfect formation, their weapons charged and ready. Supreme Commander Thek had come personally to oversee the destruction of humanity. "Begin the final assault," he commanded. "I want every human world burned, every human ship destroyed, every human alive taken prisoner for public execution. Today, we show the galaxy what happens to those who defy the hegemony." The massive fleet began its advance toward Earth. They moved slowly, maintaining perfect formation, their weapons scanning for any sign of human resistance. They expected to find the same deceptive tactics that had worked at New Boston. Instead, they found empty space. The human colonies appeared to be abandoned. The defensive installations were silent. The cargo ships that had caused so much trouble were nowhere to be seen. It was as if humanity had simply vanished. "Sir," reported the tactical officer, "we are detecting no human ships in the system. All colonies appear to be evacuated. We are not reading any defensive installations or hidden weapons." Supreme Commander Thek frowned. This was not what he had expected. The humans had shown themselves to be masters of deception. This apparent emptiness was probably another trap. "Maintain formation," he ordered. "Scan every asteroid, every moon, every piece of debris. The humans are hiding somewhere. Find them." The hegemony fleet spread out across the solar system, their sensors probing every possible hiding place. They found nothing. No hidden weapons, no disguised ships, no secret installations. The humans seemed to have simply disappeared. "Perhaps they have fled," suggested his aide. "Maybe they realized they could not win against our full strength." Supreme Commander Thek shook his head. "No, the humans who defeated Admiral Corax would not run from a fight. They are here somewhere. We just cannot see them." He was absolutely right. The Quantum Fleet existed in a state of superposition. occupying multiple positions simultaneously until the moment of observation collapsed their wave function. They surrounded the hegemony fleet like ghosts, invisible and untouchable. "Captain?" Tom waited for the perfect moment. The enemy ships were spread throughout the system, searching for an enemy they could not detect. Their formation was loose, their attention divided. It was time to spring the trap. "All units," he broadcast on the quantum channel. "Execute Protocol Omega. Show them what happens when you bomb human civilians." The quantum fleet materialized around the hegemony ships like nightmares becoming real. 50 advanced warships appeared from nowhere, their weapons already firing. The first salvo destroyed a dozen enemy vessels before they could react. Supreme Commander Thek watched in horror as his fleet came under attack from enemies that had not existed moments before. The human ships were unlike anything he had ever seen. They moved like living things, their hulls shifting and changing as they fought. "Return fire," he screamed. "All units engage the enemy." But the hegemony ships were out of position, scattered across the system in small groups. The humans had caught them at the worst possible moment. The quantum fleet struck with surgical precision, targeting command ships and weapons platforms. While avoiding unnecessary casualties, the battle raged for 18 hours. Supreme Commander Thek watched his mighty fleet being systematically destroyed by an enemy that seemed to exist outside the normal laws of physics. The humans were not just winning. They were demonstrating superiority that bordered on the impossible. When the fighting finally ended, less than 100 hegemony ships remained operational. The rest were either destroyed or disabled, drifting helplessly in space. The greatest military force in galactic history had been crushed by 50 human vessels. Captain Tom opened a channel to the surviving enemy ships. "Supreme Commander Thek, this is Captain Tom of the Human Quantum Fleet. Your forces have been defeated. Your empire's military capability has been crippled. You have one chance to prevent the complete destruction of your remaining ships. Surrender now or face the consequences of your actions." The Galactic Council chamber had never been so quiet. Representatives from dozens of species sat in stunned silence as they processed the battle reports from human space. The hegemony, the most powerful military force in the galaxy, had been defeated by a species that most had considered barely worth notice. Ambassador Lewis stood at the human podium, his expression calm and professional. Behind him, holographic displays showed the aftermath of the battle. Hegemony ships drifted powerless in space, while human rescue vessels moved among the wreckage, saving the crews of their enemies. "The hegemony attacked New Geneva without provocation," he began. "They murdered 50,000 innocent civilians. They demanded our surrender and threatened to destroy our other colonies. They believed that superior numbers and firepower gave them the right to dictate terms to peaceful species." The chamber remained silent. Every representative was calculating what this meant for their own species. If humanity could defeat the hegemony, what did that say about the balance of power in the galaxy? "We gave them opportunities to withdraw," Ambassador Lewis continued. "We offered them chances to negotiate. They chose to escalate the conflict at every turn. They committed their entire military to our destruction. They have learned the consequences of that decision." On the screens behind him, the casualty reports told the story. 700 hegemony ships destroyed or disabled. Thousands of crew members killed or captured. The greatest military disaster in recorded galactic history. Supreme Commander Thek sat in the defendants section, his forearms bound with restraints that prevented him from moving. His eyes burned with hatred as he stared at the human ambassador. The once proud leader of the hegemony had been reduced to a prisoner of war. "The surviving hegemony forces have been given terms for their surrender," Ambassador Lewis announced. "Complete disarmament of all military vessels, reparations for the destruction of New Geneva, a formal apology to be broadcast to every world. In their former empire, they have 24 hours to comply." Councillor Varn, the hegemony's representative, rose shakily to his feet. "You cannot be serious. The hegemony will never bow to primitive species. We have ruled this galaxy for centuries. We will not be dictated to by newcomers. Admiral Roy entered the chamber at that moment, his uniform displaying the medals he had earned during the recent campaign. He approached the hegemony representative with a tablet containing technical specifications. "Counselor Varn," he said politely, "perhaps this will help you understand your position." The tablet showed detailed scans of the hegemony homeworld. Every defensive installation, every military base, every government building was highlighted in red. The message was clear. Humanity knew exactly where to strike if the hegemony continued their defiance. "Impossible," Counselor Varn whispered. "Our planetary defenses are impenetrable. No enemy has ever breached our security grid." Admiral Roy smiled. "Would you like us to demonstrate our capabilities? We could disable your orbital platforms without harming the civilian population below, or we could be less precise. The choice is yours." The threat was delivered with perfect calm, making it all the more terrifying. The humans were not emotional or vengeful. They were clinical in their approach to warfare, treating the destruction of their enemies as a simple problem to be solved. Counselor Varn looked at the technical specifications again. The humans had mapped every detail of their homeworlds. Defenses. They knew things that should have been impossible to know. The implications were staggering. "How long have you been watching us?" he asked quietly. "Since first contact," Admiral Roy replied. "We learned early that the galaxy was not a safe place for peaceful species. We decided to be ready when the time came to defend ourselves." President Walsh entered the chamber, flanked by her security detail. The other representatives rose to their feet as she approached the central podium. The leader of humanity had come to address the galaxy directly. "Fellow members of the Galactic Council," she began, "yesterday, the hegemony learned that attacking human civilians comes with consequences. Today, I want to make sure that lesson is understood by everyone in this chamber." She activated a holographic display showing human space. The peaceful colonies that had seemed so vulnerable were revealed to be interconnected nodes in a vast defensive network. Every trade route was protected by hidden weapons. Every research station could deploy military assets within minutes. For 12 years, humanity has played the role of peaceful newcomers. We have traded honestly, negotiated fairly, and sought diplomatic solutions to every conflict. Some of you interpreted this as weakness. You were mistaken. The display changed to show human technological capabilities, weapons that could destroy planets, ships that existed outside normal space, defensive systems that made entire star systems impregnable. "We are not warlike by nature," President Walsh continued. "We prefer to build rather than destroy. We choose cooperation over conflict whenever possible. But we will not allow the strong to prey upon the weak. We will not permit the murder of innocents to go unpunished." Supreme Commander Thek struggled against his restraints. "You think your tricks and deceptions make you superior? The hegemony has ruled this galaxy for 500 years. We will not be replaced by primitives who hide behind technology." Admiral Roy approached the former Supreme Commander. "Your species ruled through fear and intimidation. You maintained power by convincing others that resistance was futile. That system has now failed. The galaxy has seen that the hegemony can be defeated." The truth of those words was already becoming apparent. Across the chamber, representatives from client species were whispering among themselves. The Keth Empire delegation looked particularly interested in the proceedings. The Vorthan survivors were taking detailed notes. "The old order is ending," President Walsh announced. "Species that have lived under hegemony domination for centuries are now free to choose their own path. We offer them our friendship and protection, but we will not impose our will upon them." She paused, letting her words sink in. "However, we will not tolerate aggression against peaceful species. We will not allow the strong to victimize the weak. Any species that chooses the path of conquest and domination will find themselves facing the same fate as the hegemony." Dr. Ann watched the proceedings from the observation gallery. Her psychological analysis had been perfect. The hegemony's Defeat was already causing ripples throughout galactic civilization. Species that had been oppressed for centuries were beginning to assert their independence. The Stellar Federation had already announced their withdrawal from hegemony influence. The Free Worlds Alliance was declaring their borders closed to hegemony ships. Dozens of client species were demanding renegotiation of their tributary status. "The demonstration is complete," Dr. Ann reported to her team. "The galaxy now understands that humanity is not to be underestimated." The hegemony's power was based on the perception of invincibility. That perception has been shattered. Back in the council chamber, Councillor Varn was reviewing the surrender terms on his tablet. Complete disarmament would leave the hegemony defenseless. Reparations would bankrupt their economy. The public apology would destroy their reputation. Throughout the galaxy, "These terms are unacceptable," he declared. "The hegemony will never agree to such humiliation." Admiral Roy looked at his watch. "You have 18 hours remaining to comply with our demands. After that, we will demonstrate our willingness to enforce them. I suggest you contact your government and explain their options." President Walsh concluded her address to the Council. "Humanity seeks peace, but we are prepared for war. We offer friendship to those who want it, but we will not tolerate aggression against ourselves or our allies. The choice is yours." She left the chamber, followed by the human delegation. Behind them, the representatives of other species began the difficult process of adjusting to a new reality. The hegemony was no longer the dominant power in the galaxy. 16 hours later, the hegemony government broadcast their formal surrender across all channels. Supreme Commander Thek was stripped of his rank and sentenced to life imprisonment. The terms of humanity's demands were accepted in full. 3 months after the battle, Captain Tom stood on the observation deck of his ship, looking out at the construction crews building the memorial on New Geneva. The colony was being rebuilt, stronger than before. A monument to the 50,000 victims would ensure their sacrifice was never forgotten. "Captain," his communications officer reported, "we are receiving a transmission from the Keth Empire. They are requesting a formal alliance with humanity. They want our protection against potential hegemony retaliation." Captain Tom nodded. It was the 5th such request this week. Species throughout the galaxy were seeking human protection against their former oppressors. The balance of power had shifted permanently. Dr. Ann continued her work in the Prometheus facility, analyzing threats and developing countermeasures. The hegemony had been defeated, but there were other dangers in the galaxy. Humanity would remain vigilant, ready to defend itself and its allies against whatever came next. "The hegemony thought they were testing our resolve," she told her research team. "Instead, they gave us the opportunity to demonstrate our capabilities to the entire galaxy. Now, everyone knows that humanity is not a species to be trifled with." The message had been received loud and clear. Those who dared to bomb human civilians would face consequences beyond their imagination. The galaxy had learned that peaceful species were not necessarily helpless species, and that lesson would not be forgotten for a very long time.